Hello everybody, this is Graeme, and today I'm going to be looking at a game called Stevens. In this game, each player takes on the role of a master glassmaker working in the Stephenson's glass factory in Lisbon in the middle of the 1700s. You're responsible for hiring new professionals and fulfilling contracts. All the while, the French army are getting closer and closer to their invasion. So the theme in this one is actually based on real events, and the game does come with a bit of a history book, maybe not book, more of a pamphlet that talks about the time and what's happening with the growth of Stephenson's factory, which, you know what, I always enjoy learning history through games. For the gameplay, it's pretty straightforward. You're either going to be taking a cube off the board, which represents either glass or some product used to make glass, or you'll be hiring staff to work in the various furnaces or the small factories. You'll be making investments and gaining and hopefully completing contracts during the reset phase throughout the game. So, will this game be a prime example of a perfect piece of glass, or should it just be tossed back into the furnace to be melted into something else? Let's get it to the table, see how it's played, and we'll come back with my final thoughts on Stevens. Here's Stevens' setup. Take all the profession cards with the blue and red backs and place them face up on their spots, then deal 2 out from each deck. Put the accessory tiles along with the escudo coins beside the board, sort out the cubes and place 4 green, 4 blue, 4 white cubes in their appropriate spots in the main furnace. All the contract cards get shuffled and the top 5 are placed face up, and the same with the investment cards. The French Army marker gets placed at the 55 of the scoring track. Randomly hand out the player boards, making sure that the first player board is in the mix. Each player will take their components and place their markers in the appropriate spaces. The empty spaces on their player board, 1 on the scoring track, and 1 on each of the dune and forest tracks. The influence marker gets placed on 2 on the influence track. Each player gets 4 coins, and each player can choose 1 accessory to start the game with. Then, starting with the start player, each player is randomly given one of the starting professions and places one of their ability tokens on the card. Then place the card next to the furnace. Right cards go to the right side, and the left cards go to the left. I'll be talking more about profession cards later. Now, Stevens is played over a number of rounds until the French Army marker passes 1 player's scoring piece. The army and players will generally only advance during the reset phase of each round. A reset phase is triggered when 2 of the 4 main furnaces are empty. On a player's turn, they will do one of 2 actions. Either take a cube or cubes from the board into their supply and perform the action of that space, or they will hire a profession by assigning one of their ability discs to a card and thus granting that player an ability. Let's start off with taking a cube from the board. At the start of the game, there's only glass in Stephenson's factory, but later in the game there will be products located in the small factories outside. When you take a cube from Stevens, you'll perform the action associated with the furnace you took it from. Commit a new contract, fund an investment, or activate the professions. To commit a new contract, take one of the clear cubes of glass, then take one of the contracts and pay the cost and influence of that position. Then add it to your incomplete contracts on the bottom of your board. You can only ever have 3 incomplete contracts at any time. You also do not complete contracts until the reset phase. To fund a new investment, pay the cost and coins to the position and add that card to your investments along with taking one of the clear cubes. You must always add them to the end of the line matching the product the investment produces. Orange wooden utensils here, pink fabric cubes here, or black pottery cubes here. If the investment does not produce any products, it can go in any row. And once a card has been placed, it cannot be moved, and new cards always go to the rightmost spot of the row. When you activate a profession, either take the green or blue cubes depending on the side you wish to activate, and then all players with discs on the professions will activate them to obtain the rewards. Again, I'll talk a bit more about professions in a bit. Taking products from the small factories later in the game works the same way. At the beginning of the game, you can only take 1 cube from a factory, but you can upgrade throughout the game. When you take a product or products, you'll activate the small factory you took it from. All of them are the same. You activate the professions linked to that small factory. So you've seen how to activate professions, but how do you get more? This is the second option you can do on your turn. Assign a worker to a new profession or assign it to an existing profession as an apprentice. If you wish to create a new profession, pick any of the 6 face-up cards at the top of the player board. Ones on the right must be placed on the right side of the board, and the ones on the left go on the left. Each profession card shows you how much it costs. If there's a red X, that is what you have to pay to hire that profession. Some professions will have a secondary spot as well. When you first create this profession, cannot be used. Once you have paid the cost, you will place it on the appropriate side of the board in one of the 3 rows. One row is in the main furnace, and the other 2 are the 2 small product factories. Now there is an important placement rule here. There can never be the same or more cards in a row than the row below it. So at the start of the game, if you were at a higher profession for the left side of the board, it can go here or here. If you're at a higher one on the right, it can only go here. Now after you've placed the card, you will assign one of your ability discs to it and get a benefit. There are 3 types of benefits. Moving one from your influence track allows your influence marker to move further. On the left side, there are end of game scoring. On the right side are abilities such as being able to play a card so it's the same number of cards in a row below it, or reducing the cost of a contract or investment by 1 to a minimum of 1. There are rules for removing these. Basically, you have to follow the arrows, so this one has to be placed before any of these, or you must start at the bottom up here. Now, instead of hiring a new profession, you can use one of your ability discs to reinforce an existing profession. If there is a profession that has an empty space on it that you are not the master of, you can place your disc there and pay the cost, if any. Usually they are free. Whenever that card is activated, both the master and apprentice will receive the same reward. So those are the 2 main actions you can pick from on your turn. Either take a cube off or place one of your ability tokens onto a profession card. This continues until 2 of the 4 furnaces in Stephen's factory are empty, and only those furnaces. It doesn't matter if the small factories are empty or not. This will trigger a reset phase, and there is a series of actions that must happen. First, the French army gets 1 step closer, advance the marker to the next step. If the marker reaches or passes a scoring marker, this signals the end of the game. Next, replenish the 2 furnaces that are empty. Based on the player count, the scoring track will tell you how many cubes to place back in each one. Note that only the empty furnaces receive these cubes. The other 2 furnaces are not refilled. Then you empty out all the small factories. And next, you're going to be activating your investments. This is done column by column for your investments. You must be able to pay the cost of all the cards in a column to receive the benefit from the cards in that column. You can activate some, all, or none of your investment columns. But if you choose to activate a column, the entire column must be paid for. That often involves moving your marker on the dune or forest track down. After you have activated and paid for the column, place any cubes gained on the cards themselves, and you score any points that you've gained from your cards. When all players have activated all the columns that they want, you move to the supply the small factory step. Place the cube from your investment cards onto the small factories. They will only accept the cubes in the combination shown. So you could not, for example, place a single black cube in this small factory. When you place a cube or combo of cubes, you get the depicted reward. Once all of your investment cubes have been placed, players can then fulfill contracts from their personal supply of cubes and accessories. Each contract fulfilled needs to be placed to the left of your board so that the symbols match the row. And the reset phase is now complete, and you continue with the round with the next player. The end of the game is triggered when the French army marker meets or passes a player's scoring marker. Finish the round, then all players get 1 more turn. To finish the game, you do 1 last reset phase before scoring, irrespective of how many cubes are left in the furnaces. To calculate your final scoring, start with the points from the scoring track. Add the values of where your marker ended up on the dune and forest track. Next, for each master you have, score points for the row that they are in, 1, 3, or 5 points. If you are the master and there's an apprentice on your card, you gain the additional point. Finally, you calculate your completed contracts. For each column, multiply the number of cubes spent in that column by the number of cards in that column. And finally, add points from any end-of-game abilities that you have unlocked. And the player with the most points is the winner. Let's get back to see what I thought about Stevens.
So let's talk about theme and components. First off, I really like the theme in this one. But of course, I am always swayed when there is some actual historical background given. And this little kind of booklet here, pamphlet really, does talk about Stevenson's life, the glassworks, and the invasion of France, from France, I should say. And after reading it, it does give you a better understanding of what's happening in the game. But unfortunately, the game itself is not overly thematic. But it does make some thematic sense. You know, like for example, the advancing of the French army. Reading the book, you kind of understand why that's the end of game trigger. So though I really enjoyed the theme around the game and the basics for the game, I wouldn't say the game itself was overly thematic from a mechanism point of view. I mean, what you're doing round to round kind of makes sense. For the components, they're adequate. The boards do look a little bland, but they all are functional. The cards were easy to read and the art is fine. It's just too bad that the card art doesn't, basically it always gets covered up to try and save space. I also wish that the rewards on the cards were a little larger to make them easier to read, especially from across the table. I also wish, and this is just minor, that these ability tokens here were printed on both sides. So they have kind of picture on one side, but then blank on the other. I'm not sure why. It's just a little nitpicky. The rulebook does a good job of teaching the game, but I do wish that the reset steps are either on a player aid or on the board somewhere or on the back of the rulebook. Although I did like that the back of the rulebook is not just useless, they've actually put the iconography on it here, which is definitely, you're going to need this. For the gameplay, there's a lot of things that I really like in this game, and honestly not too much that I disliked about this game. I find almost every time I play this game, I'm approaching it slightly different based on those initial cards. And that's all the cards, from the professions you can see, the contracts, the investments. I'm looking for some combos early on or things that I think are going to work well together. And that continues kind of throughout my gameplays as more opportunities open up as things are bought or moved around. I really enjoy the unlocking of my new abilities, and I found them all to be useful at certain points during the game. And I can't say, even after all my plays, oh, this one's obvious, this one you always need every game. You have to take kind of ones that depend on what's happening during that portion of the game. Do I want to get investments or contracts cheaper? Well, there's an ability for that. Or do I need to be making more cubes out of those small factories? And again, there's an ability for that. Having the ability to have the same number of cards on one row as the one below it does seem overly useful if that's the direction you're going, but the other abilities definitely have their time and place of where they're useful. Hiring the professionals is also something that's very useful and a really good decision point. If you hire somebody, you are potentially opening up the ability for someone else to place on a higher row. So is that worth it? Is it worth the card's reward that you're going to be placing to be giving someone else the opportunity to score some more points? Or where do you place it based on what you think people need to hopefully trigger it during the game? But I think one of the things that really stands out for me as a huge positive is that interconnectedness. That all the decisions I've talked about previously, this is why it makes it important, because everything's connected. Having lots of contracts is important, but you need to have the investments to provide those cubes that you need to fulfill those contracts. And if someone else has those cubes you need, maybe you need to have professions aligned with those small factories so they can be triggered when someone or you takes those cubes. Or the idea of building a shared engine building row. I can almost always add a profession to where you're building out your engine or take an apprentice on your side, so when it's triggered, I will also get some benefit, but not to the detriment of you. It's like I'm adding to what is going to be triggered when that row is going to be triggered. You also have the ability to control the speed of a round. Emptying those furnaces is all down to what the players are doing. Sometimes you get to make the decision on when to go into the reset phase because you could take that final cube. And sometimes you want that just one more round before it gets triggered. And that reset phase is something I really enjoyed as well. Having to pay for an entire column to get its reward is interesting. And paying almost always comes down to spending your forest and dune track. And honestly, during the game, it's tough to get those back. So careful planning on when to spend them is another fun decision point. It is tempting to spend them early on. Oh, I'm going to get 1 or 2 cubes. But you have to figure, is what you're getting now more useful than those end of game scoring points, because those tracks are difficult to go up on. And it's just, again, it's one of those things that I just really, really enjoy. There's just so many juicy decision points in this game, but I never found them overwhelming. But then again, they weren't overly obvious. So would I recommend this game? For sure. This is a game that, honestly, for me, it fits right in my wheelhouse of games I like to play. I like that the basics of the game are super simple. Either take a cube or hire a professional. But this opens up to a world of decisions, and having a plan at this point is definitely important. I like how most things were interconnected, and because of that, there is some player interaction. It's not direct player interaction, but watching what other players are doing and figuring out how you can benefit from what they need to do. I see you need pink cubes, and I generate pink cubes during the resets phase. So I'm going to place them in a small factory where I have professions with rewards that I need to do, so that when you take it, I'm going to get those benefits. The game is also fairly quick. The box says 30 minutes per player, but all my games have definitely been faster than that. Even at 4 players, with new players, I was done in about an hour and a half. I like that the individual turns were relatively quick as well. And I felt that there were multiple ways to get victory points, and you tended to kind of slide into one of them during the game, either contracts or getting those top row masters, but you can't ignore the other ways too much. I felt just about everything I was doing was a good decision point in the game. Never really overly complicated, but I needed to make the right decision to support my current plans. For the negatives, there actually weren't too many for me. I do wish the board looked a little nicer, and I'm not a big fan of that long board layout, as the rows of professions can get long and make it awkward. But both of these were more production-wise. From a gameplay perspective, honestly, there's nothing I dislike about this game. So overall, I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10 in the Dice Tower Seal of Excellence. Now, I do recognize that this game is not going to be for everyone, but it is one, for me, that every time I've sat down and played it, I've enjoyed it from start to finish and look forward to playing it again. But that's it for the moment. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Hey folks, thanks for watching another one of our videos. If you like our videos, if you like our channel, you would love to game with us at one of our conventions. Check out Dice Tower Cruise, Dice Tower East, and Dice Tower West. Fantastic conventions where we play games with wonderful people, a humongous library, and lots of other events and stuff. Also, don't forget to check out our channel, like and subscribe. I'm Tom Bassel.